In Marketing 200 today, we were talking in Chapter 7 about B2B business, and I want to just give you an idea of why this is an important thing for you personally to consider. Think of the example of a person that goes into Danny Leather to buy a leather coat for his girlfriend. Let's say the leather coat's $400. Let's say the salesperson who's helping you is getting commission. Let's say they get 10% commission on a sale of $400. That's $40. So even if that salesperson took half an hour to help you, they would get $40. On top of getting paid only 15 bucks an hour, an extra 40 bucks is not bad. And you do that 2 or 3 times a day, you've made an extra $80, $120 on top of your regular salary. Now, let's take the scenario of the person who works for the company that makes the leather coats and sells them to Daniel. Let's say the leather coats are sold at a wholesale price of $200 a coat, and you sell 10,000, which is reasonable. You've got 3,000 that are size medium, 3,000 that are size large, and 3,000 that are size small, and then you divide that into men's and women's. Then you've got the different stores across Canada, so you've got a couple hundred in each store, so 10,000 is a reasonable number. What's 10,000 times 200? That's a couple $1 million. Let's say you've got only 5% commission on $2 million. Well, 10% of 2 million is 200,000. So 5% would be 100,000. You would get $100,000 as your commission on making a sale of $2 million worth of leather coats. So even if you took 1 or 2 months and hired a secretary and traveled all across Canada and stayed in 5-star hotels, still making $100,000 just on that one sale is not bad. That's what B2B selling is, and that's what we're talking about in chapter number 7. All right, what I'm going to do is listen to a little narration or a little story about the main things in chapter number 7. This is from Marketing 200. Now on page 175, and I'll put that in a little typewritten notes underneath, we've got the 4 different categories of B2B organizations. Producers of goods and services, intermediaries, middlemen, government and non-profit organizations. Most people, when they're talking about B2B stuff, don't think about the government. The government is a great way to make money. I'll give you a perfect example. Let's say you graduate and got a job with Hitachi Canada or Toshiba. You could have a very difficult time trying to sell Toshiba notebooks to all different kind of vendors, or you could get the contract with the Durham Region School Board and they would buy 70,000 flat screen panels, right? That'd be a great example of a B2B situation. Or a U of T Scarborough campus that needed 16 labs with flat panel monitors, and you would be the person who is making that connection. If you got 5% commission on a sale like that, that could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's an example of government. Think of anything where your tax dollars are paying for things. It could be the Ministry of Education, it could be trucks, you could be a person with Ford Canada, and your job is to contact all the municipalities around Toronto, York Region, Durham Region, and sell them F350s and F450s as trucks for road crews. That's an example of business with the government. Non-profit organizations. That's also a big B2B thing. Think of the Cancer Society, the Heart and Stroke Foundation. What are some other examples of non-profit organizations? Pardon? Seneca is an education institution, so that would come under government units. What's another example of non-profit organizations? How about the CNIB, Canadian National Institute for the Blind? I mean, they need internet service providers, they need computers, they need office equipment, they need photocopy machines, just like any other business, right? Non-profit only means that they don't make a profit. It doesn't mean that they don't do business and marketing, right? They have to have websites. You can sell search engine optimization services to them, because when the Heart and Stroke Foundation has their lottery, they're competing for you to buy lottery tickets from the Heart and Stroke Foundation like you would from the Cancer Society or everything else. Okay. On page 176, organizational buyers are less emotional in their buying than final consumers. What that means is if you want to sell somebody a cheeseburger, you've got a commercial on TV with the melted processed cheese dripping out of it. You get a person, put it in their mouth, and it looks really delicious, and you get all kinds of pictures that look great. If you're the person from the dairy organization that wants to sell McDonald's cheese, you don't do it that way. You have an individual person contact them and say, listen, I understand you're currently buying your cheese in a large scale from Parmalat or Agripur or whatever the dairy organization is. We would also like to supply, we know your specifications, 3 1/4 inches by 3 1/4 inches by 1/8 inch thick, and how it has to be wrapped and so on and so on. So it's not an emotional thing, it's more size, weight, measure, and so on. Which leads to me to these points on page 177, purchasing specifications. When you're dealing with these B2B situations, you have to know the purchasing specifications. For example, if you were going to sell PCs to Seneca College for putting in new labs, one of the specifications would be that it all have to have DVD burners. They'd also have to have 2 or 3 USB ports. Also a little spot for SD cards, because some students are using devices where they just want to put the information directly on their SD card. There's also other hardware considerations. Can you think of some? They got to be able to print to a network printer. What else? You have to